So in today's episode, I'm going to go through my process when it comes to editing photos I've taken at nighttime. Now, taking photos at nighttime and daytime really does differ, and something I found is I can often visualize how my photos I've taken during the daytime are going to look before I've even loaded them onto my laptop. Whereas with photos I've taken at nighttime, I have to use a bit more of my imagination to visualize the end result. Now this is for a number of reasons, but the biggest one is at nighttime, as all the light is artificial, all of these lights are different colors, different color temperatures and so on. So the majority of what I'm doing in post is actually correcting those lights and bringing everything into a more visually harmonious space. So I'm going to switch over to my laptop now and go through my editing process. So the first image I'm going to edit is this one here, which I shot in Tokyo last year. Now as you can see, all of the light in this picture here is artificial. Some of it's coming from the traffic lights, some of it's coming from street lights, some from shop fronts, and all of those lights come with different color temperatures and different colors. So what you end up with is quite an unattractive image. Now I do have an interesting composition here, but visually it's not that interesting to look at. So this is probably a good moment to speak about today's sponsor, DxO Labs. DxO are best known for their Photolab app, which is a fully featured photo editing program and is also an alternative to Lightroom. They're also known for FilmPack, which is a film emulation tool, and this can also be used as a plugin within Lightroom. At the moment, I mainly use DxO software to remove noise and correct my RAW files. I don't do this for every one of my photos, but for my selects and the shots I've taken at nighttime, I feel like it does a really good job at cleaning up the RAW files and making them easier to edit. The denoising in DxO Labs software, in my experience, is better than the one you find in Lightroom. With Lightroom, I always find that when I add the denoiser, it makes the photo look really soft, and you see things like skin and textures become completely smoothed over. So it is removing the noise, but in the process, it's also removing detail from the photo. Whereas I find on DxO Labs software, their denoising technology removes the noise while maintaining the texture. Now you don't necessarily need to do this step. You can use Lightroom's denoise and the sharpening tools to get the RAW to a similar spot, but I use it to give my RAW files a better starting point, and it's really easy to do. I have Pure RAW 5 installed. It has a plugin for Lightroom, so all I have to do is hit File, go down to Plugin Extras, and press Preview and process DxO Pure RAW 5. After selecting this, the Pure RAW 5 pop-up comes up, and I have a couple options to choose from. And on the right hand side, you can see the different denoising options. I like to use the X-Trans one, as this one was designed for Fujifilm files. Now it does give you a preview of the original RAW file and how it's going to look after it's been processed. And as you can see in the original, there's lots of noise in the shadows and in the background. And after the denoising is applied, it looks a lot cleaner without losing much detail. Now, as I said, this isn't a necessary step. Lightroom does apply some denoising as well and also apply some sharpening. But in my experience, I do feel Pure RAW does do a better job at that. So once I'm happy with how it looks, I just hit process now. And after it's done processing, it will send the updated RAW file back into Lightroom where I can start making some changes. So DxO currently have a Black Friday sale going on. Some of their products are up to 50% off. The products are also one-time purchases, so unlike Adobe products, it's not a subscription, so you can buy it once and use it for years and years afterwards. For those of you interested, DxO do have a Black Friday sale running from November 18th to the 2nd of December. And furthermore, I have a discount code where you can get a further discount on top of the Black Friday sale. I have all the information, the links and the discount code in the description down below. When it comes to my creative process, there are two main steps I take to get the photos where I want them to be. The first one is to correct the exposure and the color. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the white balance and the basic adjustment tools to correct the image and bring it to a spot where it's easier to apply more creative changes. The second phase is to add those creative choices, and this is mostly done using the tone curve and HSL sliders. So I'll start with the white balance, and I'm just making it slightly cooler, bringing in a tiny amount of greens, and then I head to the basic adjustments. And the main thing I'm looking to do here is to balance the shadows and the highlights. Often when you take photos at nighttime, the highlights will be wildly blown out, whereas the shadows will be very dark. And with that amount of contrast, what ends up happening is the viewer's eye is almost always attracted to the point where it's brightest. So in this image, as you can see, the headlight at the bottom is the brightest point of the image, and there's also this light in the background. But that's not where I want my viewer's eye to go. I want the viewer to look directly at the two subjects in the middle of the frame and not at the lights. So using the basic adjustments, I'm just going to bring down the exposure a bit, bring down the highlights, raise the shadows, raise the whites tiny, bring down the black. And as I said, this isn't going to be anything too drastic. It's all about balancing the image and bringing it to a point where I can add some more creative changes to it. When it comes to the white balance, you can use the eyedropper tool, but I find it to be a bit inaccurate, or sometimes I choose places in the image. For example, you're meant to choose the brightest point of the image or the most white point. But when I do it for this photo, it just turns it completely green. So I also like to bring down the texture and clarity, vibrance and saturation. I feel like in general, most digital cameras photos are overly sharp and it ends up looking a bit unnatural. So I'd rather remove the texture and clarity to begin with, edit the photo, and then down the line, if I want to add the sharpness back in, I can. As for the clarity slider, I never really like using this. I find that it adds way too much contrast into the midtones, and it ends up looking quite ugly. Now these days, most of my editing is actually done using the tone curve. I feel like it's probably the most powerful tool in Lightroom, and it's actually one of the most basic tools. You find it in almost all photo editing apps. And what I like about it is you can be really specific about where you add contrast, where you add brightness, where you add red, greens or blues. And in my opinion, it gives you the most creative control over your editing. Now usually when I'm using the tone curve, I add 3 points to each of the lines. I like to add the S-curve. This is sometimes referred to as a film curve. I'm not sure if I fully agree with that, but it's a good way to begin your edit. You can also use this tool here to select which part of your photo you want to add adjustments for. As you can see, when I move this over the photo, it adds a new point on the actual tone curve. So if I want to darken this area here, so the seat behind the two subjects in the middle, I can just click there. It creates a point on the tone curve, and then I can drag that point down. And as you can see, it's dragging down all the shadows in the area. Now I can easily spend hours on the tone curve making micro adjustments, but for this episode, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly so I can show you how I use it. After I'm happy with the tone curve, I head down to the HSL sliders to make some further changes. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with where the photo is now. I'm now going to use the mask tool to reduce the brightness of the lights in the photo. I'm also adding in some vignetting again to reduce the brightness around the edge of the photo. And this changes from photo to photo, but in this case I feel like using the vignette to focus the viewer's eye to the center of the photo is going to work pretty well. Whenever you're editing a photo, always try to think of it from the viewer's point of view. So think where you're going to want the viewer's eye to go and edit according to that. So if you want your viewer's eye to be on subjects in the middle of your frame, but there's very bright lights in the corner, you're going to want to bring down the light in the corner of your image in order for your viewer's eye to be drawn to where you want it to be drawn to. I'm also going to use the crop tool to really center the two subjects in the middle of the frame. So I'm just going to make a few more adjustments now to finish up the photo. Firstly, I'm going to use sharpen. So the way I like to use the sharpening tool is to hold the option key on the keyboard, and when I drag the slider, the image turns black and white, and in the little box on the right hand side, you can see exactly how much sharpening is being applied. Afterwards, I head down to the masking. I hold the Alt key and I drag this towards the right. Now what masking does is it dictates exactly where sharpening is added. So I drag up the radius and details until I can see the rough outlines of the image and the subject. So that looks about right. I'm now going to head back up and make some changes to the basic adjustments and tone curve. Recently, I've actually been using the color grading tool less and less. I feel like you can pretty much do everything you want in the tone curve without having to mess around with the color grading. But for those of you who want to use it or who don't want to use the tone curve, it is a quick and easy way to push colors into your image. But I'm going to head back up to the basic adjustments now and the tone curve and just make some further adjustments to get the photo where I want it to be. So I'm pretty happy with where this photo is now. This was the original, this is the edited version. My main aim was to bring down some of the brighter areas of the image and to bring more focus onto the two subjects in the center of the frame. Now, if I had more time to edit this photo, I would spend a lot more care bringing down some more of the brightness in the background and maybe adding some more detail and color to the two subjects in the middle. But generally speaking, this is my editing process when it comes to editing photos at nighttime. Now briefly before going on to the next photo to edit, I do have my own preset pack. I actually start most of my edits using the preset pack as a base and I make changes from that point onwards. And I find that one, it saves me time and also it gives my photos more of a consistent look. If you are interested and want to support the channel, I have a link to those down below in the description. So this is the second photo I'll be editing in today's episode. Again, shot in Tokyo. And this is a good example of what I mean, where this is a shot where when you look at the raw, it doesn't actually look that great. The colors don't look so nice, there's lots of lights coming from different directions, which are different colors, and it all makes for quite a messy raw file. So like last time, the first thing I'm gonna do is quickly send this through Pure Raw 5 just to clean up the raw file. We're back into Lightroom now. The first thing I'm gonna do is correct the light and color within this photo. So first up, white balance. Then I'm in the basic adjustments and I'm bringing down the highlights, raising the shadows, bringing up the whites a bit, bringing the blacks down. So at this point, I'm happier with how the photo looks. It's at a more balanced spot. So now I'm going to head down to the tone curve and push some colors and more contrast into this photo. So again, I'm adding my points to the tone curve. I'm going to quickly add an S curve to this one. I'm actually going to bring the highlights down as I feel like the light in the back is a bit too bright. And then I'm going to head into the red channel now and push some cooler tones into the image. Also bringing down the texture and the clarity to remove some of that digital look in the photo. Then I'm down to the HSL sliders to change some of the colors here. When it comes to colors you're using at nighttime, this is completely a creative choice. I like to push, depending on the image, I will push teals and blue tones into the shadows, or I can end up pushing warmer tones like reds and magentas in there. And it goes vice versa for the highlights. Sometimes I'm adding warmer tones, sometimes it's cooler tones. Because the colors used in your edit can really help convey the story or emotion of the photo. For example, in this image here, where I was looking to convey a sense of loneliness, I've added more blue tones into the image because blue tones in film and photography can signify loneliness and sadness. So this is just one example, and you can get really creative with this. There are no real right or wrong answers, but try to be mindful and have purpose behind how you're editing your photo. So I'm back at the sharpening tool. Again, I hold the Alt key on my keyboard and then drag the sharpening up. I also adjust the masking so I can control exactly where the sharpening is being applied. And next I'm going to head up to the masking tool and add the radial gradient. So as you can see, as I'm editing this photo, I'm constantly going between the different tools and making small adjustments until I get the photo to a place I want it to be. With editing, there's a lot of trial and error and just testing different tools out and different colors to see if they work. As I said earlier, for each shot, I can easily spend a couple hours editing. So it really comes down to how much time you want to devote to editing, because it's a bit like photography itself. The more time you spend editing, the better your eyes are gonna get at knowing what to change and which areas of the image to tweak to bring together a better overall photo. But for this shot here, I'm also going to add some grain in, as I feel like it's going to help add a bit of texture to the shot. So I'm pretty happy with where this photo is after this quick editing session. This is obviously a quick edit of this shot. As you can see here, this is the version of the photo which I posted to social media earlier this year. And with most of the shots which go up on social media, I've easily spent a couple hours editing them. Also, the edits I make will change depending on the day, the mood I'm in, the music I'm listening to, and so on. So every editing session can actually end up with different results. But just getting back to the edit we done today, as you can see in the original photo, there's lots of lights with different colors coming in, and it's a bit ugly. With the edit, what I've tried to do is bring all the colors into a warmer green or yellow tone, and then I've also tried to direct the viewer's eye to the main subject who is running through the tunnel. When it comes to editing, I always feel like if you have a plan in your mind of where you want the viewer's eye to go, it makes editing a lot easier, because otherwise there are a million different ways you can edit the same photo. I could turn this black and white, I could go for a cooler tone, I could go for something a bit warmer, but you kind of have to decide what you want the photo to say and do, and then edit in that direction. My final point will be just to have fun and be creative when it comes to editing. In my opinion, when it comes to photography, you don't have to recreate real life. Unless you're doing documentary photography. I've mentioned this before on this channel, but when you watch most movies that come out, the look of them doesn't really represent real life. You get some films where there's a real distinct orange or yellow cast over it, or you get films where it's very blue or it's very green. And this is done for creative reasons, and as I said, it doesn't replicate what you see in real life, which is fine. And the same can be done for your photography too. So that pretty much wraps up today's episode. If you have any questions about my photo editing process, drop them down in the comments below and I will do my best to get back to you. A huge thanks for supporting this channel, and also a big thanks to DxO Labs for sponsoring this episode. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.